All right, we may have some more people join us, but we wanted to welcome all of you today to our leadership conversation with Dr. Tom Bogart of Columbia College. I'm Renee Chow. I am the chair of the Leadership Columbia Alumni Association this year. We are, just for anyone who's unfamiliar, we're a group of graduates from the Leadership Columbia program who are committed to continued professional development and civic service. And today is actually our last in a series of leadership conversations. These virtual sessions that we've been having have taken the place of our traditional luncheon series, while we've been navigating the pandemic. And so we're honored to have Dr. Bogart to close out our programming series today. Wanted to do a couple of housekeeping items real quick. One is to keep your eyes and ears out for information coming your way about our May programming. We're putting the final details on all of that together, and we'll get that information out to you all very, very soon. We want to thank Schmoyer and Company, a longtime supporter of the LCAA program. They have been our program sponsor this year, and so we're really grateful for their continued support. So yes, for today, we're joined with Dr. Bogart, who's going to share about his leadership journey and some of the things that are going on and the recent leadership changes and everything going on with Columbia College. Dr. Bogart joined, is the 20th president of Columbia College and began that tenure in October of 2020. After earning a BA in economics and mathematical sciences from Rice University, Dr. Bogart then gained his PhD in economics from Princeton University. And he was previously the president of Maryville College from 2010 through 2020. As we go through the conversation with Dr. Bogart today, please enter your questions into the chat feature. We just want to be sure to capture those while they're in your mind, and we'll save time at the end to talk about those and save the Q&A time. So just put those in, and then we'll do a final call for Q&A. So with that, Dr. Bogart, I turn it over to you. Thank you so much for being here.
Well, thanks, Renee, and it's such an honor to be invited to join this group. And I didn't get to see the registrants ahead of time, but I was already nervous. And now when I see my distinguished predecessor, Beth Dindorf, on the call, if worse comes to worse, I'll just turn the questions over to her. So I appreciate her support since I arrived and her leadership when she was here. But I'm going to talk a little bit about Columbia College and all the good things that are going on here. I'll do that at the beginning because I'm kind of boring and I want to do this before you go to sleep. And then I'll talk a little bit about me, and then we'll talk about whatever y'all want to talk about. Since I haven't had the benefit of seeing one of these before, with any luck, it'll be more or less what y'all are expecting, or maybe even a little bit better than what you're expecting from me. So Columbia College, it's an exciting year. Commencement's Friday for us, so it's finals week here on campus. So it is both eerily quiet and eerily tense. But the key part this year is, despite the challenges of COVID, we have been overwhelmingly healthy this year, and we've been very safe. We have been in person since August. Of course, we've had a lot more online than before. We've really restricted capacity. We haven't let anyone who's not a student, faculty, or staff member come to campus, and so forth. But we've at least been able to maintain an on-campus experience for people, which is such a crucial part of the overall experience, and been able to do it safely. We've done some creative things this year in order to help facilitate student celebrations. We had our first ever October commencement 2 weeks after I arrived to celebrate our May and August graduates in 2020. And we had our first ever graduation at a minor league baseball field at Segra Park. We partnered with them to be able to do it safely, yet in person. And our commencement on Friday will be at the convention center downtown, and we'll be having 3 separate commencement ceremonies, we split the students up by academic division. So again, just like everybody else in times of COVID, the watchword has been flexibility and resilience this year. To try to help move past COVID, we are, of course, encouraging vaccinations, and we were delighted to partner with Lexington Medical Center to host an on-campus vaccination event on April 12th. We had close to 100 members of the community who hadn't already been vaccinated get their first shots. So that was kind of nice. We've opened up a community health center. The college actually owns several properties across the street from the main campus. And because we're a small campus, there's a limit on how much we can afford by ourselves. But fortunately, here in Eau Claire, we have this wonderful Eau Claire Health Cooperative. And with a really great partnership with them, they've actually installed a full service clinic that is literally across the street from campus, across Colonial Drive from College Place United Methodist Church, for those of you that know the area. And so we provide the property and they provide the equipment and skilled people. And so it's not only a great resource for our students, faculty, and staff, but also for the College Place community and the Windermere community, the Eau Claire more broadly. It's what we do here at Columbia College. We really see ourselves not as an island, but really as an asset to this part of the city and beyond. So it's been good right now. The future is looking great. Our new student enrollment projections are up for next year. Just to give you a sense, of course, the pandemic hit us like it hit everyone. But we already have more new students registered for next fall than we had registered that showed up last fall. And we're still in April. And so we're really making good progress, including, of course, our first full year of recruiting men. We're on track to have between 40 and 50 men here next year, including men living on campus, which will be a first for us. And as a college, a big part of what we do is to continue to review and augment and revise our academic offerings. The headline this year has been creating a brand new institute. And this institute has a mouthful, but I'm going to say all of it. Maybe we'll come up with a quick shorthand eventually. It's the Institute for Building Resilience Through Trauma-Informed Practice. Building resilience, that's the key part. The trauma-informed practice is how. Over the last 5 to 10 years, we've developed a real expertise here on campus through our social work program, education, criminal justice, psychology, and elsewhere in what are called trauma-informed practices. What that basically is recognizing that people are not machines, that when people have had various sources of insecurity or various types of traumatic experiences, food insecurity, sometimes violence, domestic violence, housing insecurity, before they can learn, before they can thrive, we have to meet them as individuals, not just as students or as workers. And so what we've been doing over the last several years is we developed a master's program in education using these trauma-informed practices. We submitted it to our accreditor in November of 2019. And our accreditor requires a 6-month lag between looking at the proposal and launching it. So if you think about that, November of 2019, we said, we know that there are people who have been traumatized and we need to educate people to use best practices in reaching them. We launched the program in May of 2020. When of course the whole world had just been traumatized and people were saying, wow, you sure turned that around quickly. No, the need was already there. That's what we do at Columbia College. We focus on what the needs are, how we can best meet them. And this was a situation where it was very obvious to people that the right program had met the right time. We did no advertising. We put something out on social media and we overflowed the first class with a waiting list in 2 weeks. We also so the first cohort started in August. The second cohort, which was also full, started in January. We'll be starting a third cohort this summer, and that's filling up quickly. So the master's program is already going well. We will be launching this summer a certificate in higher education, and we're also working on a certificate in business and some related professional development opportunities in this idea of trauma-informed practices. Because of course, all of us have colleagues as in our positions as leaders, we lead people who have experienced trauma. And to be effective leaders for them, we need to meet those personal needs. Just briefly, another program that we're launching here, it's actually one that started at Clemson and a number of schools have joined in on, is one called Call Me Mister. This is a program that recruits, develops, and graduates men to become educators. And it's men from underserved and socioeconomically disadvantaged populations who will go on to serve those communities as well. And the idea is to provide a cohort, co-mentoring, peer mentoring framework for these men. This fits in with our new gender inclusive policy. We want everyone to come as a student, but it also really fits in with our historical focuses on leadership development, especially our strengths in education, and our emphasis on social justice. So we're really excited about that. And I'll just also say in passing, every year is a challenge because we have talented faculty who retire. We have 2 really wonderful faculty retiring this year. We're a small place, so 2 is very noticeable. But we're also recruiting new faculty, not only to replace those positions, but also to augment some of our strengths and to create more capacity. Outside the classroom, we really believe as a small college, our focus is on developing people not just as students, which is important, but as people. One important dimension for that is student athletics. This year we had 10 student athletes qualified to compete in the national championships in their respective sports. So again, we were able to have a full year of athletic competitions and our students really rose to those challenges. We celebrated a conference championship this year in indoor track and field. So I'm very proud of the great work of our students. And for outdoor track and field, the meet was over the weekend. We finished second, but that's okay. We're certainly, we're in the mix. We continue to try. So we have 10 really successful women's athletics teams. This fall, we will add 4 men's teams. And they have a lot to live up to, but we'll have men's teams in soccer, cross country, track and field, and golf. So that will be another addition to the campus environment. The college is on solid ground financially. Despite the pandemic, we had a balanced budget for our fiscal year 2020. We're on track to actually run a surplus this year, thanks in part to some timely stimulus funding, but of course, there are expenses that don't always line up nicely with that. So we'll run a surplus this year, but we'll carry some of that over and use that in the next couple of years. We refinanced our debt on favorable terms, closed on that in December, and are undertaking some important capital projects really focused on renovation and maintenance of the existing capital stock. So fun time here on campus. One of the things we continue to work on is making Columbia College as affordable as possible. And I will say that the stimulus package with the grants that we are passing on to students has been very helpful in that. So I know all of you are in touch with your congressional representatives and others. And so if you see them, tell them thank you. We do. And again, what we're focused on here every day is carrying out our mission. As Renee mentioned, I arrived in October. I am really impressed. I was impressed before I got here, but having the chance to meet people, even though, as I say, I'm better at memorizing faces than foreheads, I've started to get to know some foreheads, even with the masks. Our students are really awesome. People sometimes want to complain to me. They're worried about the future and the next generation and all this stuff. And I say, just come to camp. Well, you can't come to campus yet. But after the pandemic, come to campus and I will personally introduce you to hundreds of reasons to be optimistic about the future. Our students are amazing. So How did I get here at this wonderful place? As Renee pointed out, I earned a PhD in economics, and so, wow, nothing says fun like listening to an economist after lunch. And yet here you are, you're dedicated people. The irreverent answer of how I ended up here is I was an assistant professor of economics and I couldn't keep my mouth shut in meetings. But there's a slightly different answer to that, and then we can talk about whatever y'all want to talk about. So most people are not economists, and you're better people for that. But let me tell you something about what economists see in the world. Economists, you'll hear economists talk a lot about markets. And in particular, when economists are thinking about markets, what they're thinking about is mutually beneficial exchange, or what, when I worked at a management school, I was taught to call win-win, right? We've all heard that. That's what economists see happening out there all over the world all the time. And so economists get a bad reputation as being boring and negative and awful people, and it's well-deserved. But also at the heart of what we do is what I think of as something fundamentally optimistic. When I look around the world, I see people who are giving a value in order to get a value. And that means that there are opportunities for people who can find those win-win, those mutually beneficial exchanges. And one of the keys to creating those mutually beneficial exchanges is specialization. I mentioned Columbia College is a small place. I'm one person, right? Columbia College cannot be everything to everyone. We can't do everything. Sometimes big universities try to do everything. We absolutely know we can't. That's a benefit. What we will focus on is what we're really, really good at. And we will exchange that for what others are really, really good at. And we will partner with them. And there are already some neat examples of that. There's one really creative program we've got with Midlands Tech. There's a number of pipeline programs with USC. The new president of Benedict is really sharp, and she and I have been kicking some ideas around about things we might be able to do together, plus all of the work that we get to do with our partners in the community. And so part of how I got here is, as an economist, I look for those win-wins, and I look to identify what are we good at that we can do, and what are other people good at that we can benefit by working together with them. I did not graduate high school planning to become president of a small college. I don't know very many people who do. I went to college. I went to college planning to be an engineer. I grew up in a town that IBM was the big employer, and everybody I knew worked for IBM or the federal government or something. And so I thought I was going to go to college, get a degree, work for the big company. And I went to a relatively small college, place called Rice University. And one of the nice things about small colleges is you get to know professors and have conversations with them. And as I got to know the professors, what I discovered was I was fascinated with economics, and according to them, I was pretty good at it. And there was this whole career called being an economist and an economics professor. And I started my life as a researcher. Rice is a research university. I then went on and got a PhD, and I was hired at a research university. I spent 12 years at a place called Case Western Reserve University in Cleveland, Ohio. And so I started off, I spent, a decade or more, well, close to 2 decades in a research environment where it's research first. I'm no longer in that environment. What happened, my entire life in some sense has been a discovery. I'm not doing now what I thought I would be doing. It makes perfect sense looking backwards, as Schopenhauer said, right? Life can be only understood looking backwards, but must be lived forwards. So I was a researcher, and in grad school, I got to do a little bit of teaching, but when I became a professor at Case, I started teaching, and it turns out I really, really enjoyed it and got a lot of value out of it. And the students at least seemed to think I was pretty good at it because they kept giving me teaching awards. So I started as a researcher, and then I came to really value teaching. And I also really valued the idea of trying to build something bigger than me. And was involved, and that's the couldn't keep my mouth shut in meetings part of it. I was chairing a strategic planning exercise my second year as an untenured professor, which those of you not in academia is a career killer, but I ended up being tenured anyways. And I love doing that, but what I discovered was I really valued the research. I was good at it. I enjoyed it, but I really cared about was the teaching and the developing students. And so as I moved into institutional leadership, I also decided I was going to completely change careers and change type of institutions. And so I went and became the chief academic officer at a regional comprehensive school. And then president, as Renee mentioned, of a school in Tennessee, very similar to Columbia College. And then fortunately, since October, the chance to be here. So I was a researcher, I was a teacher, now institutional leader. The connecting threads in all of that too. First of all, I believe that the way to change the world is one person at a time. It starts with me, it carries on from others. And I love working, I've gravitated to smaller institutions because I believe that is an amazingly powerful environment for changing the world in big ways by working individually with people. The second one is not as obvious. When I was a researcher, I did a lot of work in urban economic development and on public-private partnerships and ways to revitalize communities and housing markets and public policy. So I was a researcher in that. As an institutional leader, I've been active in community organizations that do it. A big attraction of coming to Columbia College, as I mentioned, we own a lot of properties surrounding our campus. Our campus is in the middle of a really interesting community where there's a lot of interesting development happening around it, especially coming up North Main. And so the opportunity to be active in that role was really exciting. All right. So the other thing that was on my homework, and again, I have no idea how y'all are used to this, but I'll just mention a couple of things, leadership elements that we can either explore or that are at least a front of mind for me on a regular basis. And I'll say in passing, I haven't had the privilege of being part of Leadership Columbia yet, but I was part of Leadership Blunt, class of 2012. That was the county I lived in at the time. And then Leadership Knoxville in 2014. So I'll say thank you to those of you who have chosen to invest your time in developing your leadership skills and in the community connections that way. I'm personally benefited from those types of programs. And to continue, this makes even more sense. But a couple of thoughts about leadership for what it's worth. Biggest one is humility. Now, don't get me wrong, I have a healthy self-esteem. You don't apply for jobs as college presidents unless you already think pretty highly of yourself. So don't worry. But humility matters. If you're named to a leadership position, that's not the goal. Right? What being named to a leadership position is the starting point for actually being able to accomplish something, working with others for the institution. I know way too many people that get confused about ends and means in this. Related to which, you're smart. I don't know all of you. I know a couple of y'all. You're smart, but you're not smarter than every single person in the room all the time about everything. And it's really important to remember that. It's really important for me to remember that because I have this job title that will cause people to agree with me whether or not I'm being stupid or not. And so I need to find ways to make sure that I elicit that from people. The other thing is that everyone has a story and everyone's a protagonist in their own story. And oftentimes we are minor characters in other people's stories. And it's important to remember that at times. People often like to talk about leadership styles. I worked in a management school for 12 years, and so I've heard a lot of different things. I'll mention 3 things really quickly. One is I was a soccer player all the way through college. Soccer coaches are not like American football coaches. It's not the micromanage to the second to the detail. It's more you recruit the best people. You put them in positions where they can be successful. You help them work together to achieve a common goal. That's what I like to do. And that's really how I envision a lot of what my job is it's like being coach of the soccer team. Another important part of my job is to be dispensable. My previous institution, I was there when we celebrated our bicentennial. It puts 10 years as president in perspective to celebrate a bicentennial. At Columbia College, we will celebrate 175 years in 2029 in my 9th year as president. Again, puts it in perspective. This place was successful for 166 years before they ever heard of me. It'll be successful for 175 years after I leave. And so my job is to do the best I can, but also to make sure that when I walk out the door, there are other people lined up to take my place. And finally, management by walking around. I mentioned IBM. I actually worked summers at IBM for 5 years during college as a programmer, as an engineer. And I learned a lot of things. I learned I didn't want to work for IBM my whole career, but the official management practice at IBM was, and perhaps still is, management by walking around. And again, there's a formal discussion of that, but the name is pretty much what it sounds like. And my example of that in higher ed, like I mentioned, I was on the soccer team. One time when I never met the president of Rice University. Except when I shook his hand when I got my diploma. But one time during a soccer game, the ball went out of bounds. I noticed he rode a very noticeable bicycle. I mean, there's no other word for it other than a nerd bicycle. So you could see it coming. And I looked over and I saw, his bike was there and he was on the sidelines talking to somebody. Okay, play started up again, and 10 or 15 minutes later, went out of play, and I looked over to the sidelines. He was gone. No big deal. Didn't talk to him. 10 minutes or less. No big deal. Except that was in fall of 1984. And I'm still telling this story. And now I'm the president. That's why I believe in management by walking around. You never know what kind of an impact you're going to make on somebody, that 30 years later, they're going to be telling the story. And I didn't even know that they were paying attention. The last thing I'll say in recognizing time, I was told 30 to 35. Well, no, I'm not going to say the last thing. I've got a couple of things I can fit them in. Just briefly, accountability. In higher ed, at least, there's this knee-jerk reaction to form a committee so that you never have to actually be held accountable for anything. One of the reasons I've gotten the jobs that I did is because I was willing to take responsibility for things. And for better or worse, I really respect people who are willing to take responsibility, ask for help, but take responsibility and take accountability. And so I'm hoping that you're surrounded by people like that and that you're one of those people. I try to be one of those people. Second thing is to know yourself. You don't get into things like Leadership Columbia without a strong track record of success. That's awesome. But it's also really important to know what's truly important to you. And again, I've gravitated to certain types of institutions that have a particular type of mission that resonates for me. And I hope that that's also true for you. And if you haven't quite figured out, well, what's important, take the time to figure it out, because this isn't rehearsal. This is what you've got. Related to which is who matters and whose opinion matters. Keeping up with the Joneses or keeping up with the Kardashians or, your family or friends or whoever, that matters. Where are you comfortable? Famously hot versus lake effect snow. Beth and I are both recovering Midwesterners, and I think we share an opinion about ever being back in that kind of a winter again. Small versus large metropolitan areas. I have friends who can't imagine living someplace as small as this. I have friends who can't imagine living someplace as big as this. Red states, blue states. What do you think barbecue is? Again, those are funny things, but I've lived in 11 different places for at least a year. They're all wonderful in their own way, but figure out where you want to be. And how are you changing and growing? Here at Columbia College, we claim to be preparing people to be lifelong learners. And where's the evidence that we are? I like to read books. Everybody has, and some other things outside my comfort zone, but I hope you're doing things that you're not the same person now that you were 5 years ago. One of my favorite cliches, I heard this when I was a teenager and I took it to heart. There's a huge difference between 10 years of experience and 1 year of experience repeated 10 times. And I hope you're getting experience. And finally, get a life. You're more than just a job. You're in leadership roles, so yes, people are looking at you, but part of what they're looking at for you for is to not be crazy workaholics. And don't have your entire life just be your job title. Again, I spend a fair amount of time around college presidents. I can tell you stories about people that's their entire identity. And then the day they're not a college president, what do they do with themselves? Or even when they're off duty? Well, you're never off duty totally, but who are you really when you're not president, so-and-so? So again, those are a couple of leadership ideas that I try to keep in mind as I'm kicking through this. That's a lot for y'all to have to suffer through on a beautiful afternoon. And so let me stop there and see if you have questions for me, questions for each other, or talk anything y'all want to talk about. Thank you so much for taking the time and for being here today and for all you're doing for Columbia.
Thank you, Dr. Bogart. That was, I certainly enjoyed getting all the updates about Columbia College and hearing about your leadership lessons learned. Wrote down some notes for me to ponder later and everything, so appreciate you taking the time. I think Kim might kick us off with a question, and then please, everyone, put your questions into the chat and we'll ask those to Dr. Bogart.
Yes, Renee, thank you. And thank you, Dr. Bogart. I actually want to ask for you to share a bit more deeply about the journey that you took to get from that track you were on, economist, business leader. I sensed in sort of how you got very demonstrative in your reflection that there might have been a pivotal experience or a seminal moment that had you kind of go, this isn't the life I want, or this isn't the path I want to be on. And what was that journey? What were the signs that told you that it was time to pause and reflect and find that environment that suited your personality and where you could make that contribution that you talked so eloquently about?
Oh, yeah, that's a lovely question. There's two pivotal moments that come to mind. And the first one is I had the good fortune to marry up. So I still haven't quite figured out why my wife lets me stick around with her, but thank God she does. But she and I were talking. She graduated from a small college called Baldwin-Wallace outside of Cleveland, and I had been approached. This was around my 10th or 11th year as a professor, and I was approached by a major research university in Atlanta that I won't name, private, for a leadership position there, and I interviewed with them, and it was fascinating and it was interesting. But when I came back, and at the time I was chair of the economics department, and I had been on the executive committee of the faculty for the university and whatnot, and I knew I wanted to move into institutional leadership. And Baldwin-Wallace is more like Columbia College, is more teaching oriented. I came back from the trip and I was telling my wife, it's like, even if they make the offer, I'm not sure I would take it. And she said, well, okay, 10 years from now, would you rather be president of Baldwin-Wallace or dean of the Goizueta School at the business school at Emory? And without even batting an eye, I said, I'd rather be President Baldwin Wallace. She says, well, probably should start thinking of it. And within about a year, I was provost at a teaching oriented place. So part of it was her asking the question, which crystallized. But what had happened to crystallize that was really, so in the 98, 99 year, so my eighth and ninth, after 8 years as professor, I had the chance to take a sabbatical. And I spent the year as a visiting professor at the University of Michigan, which is an amazing university, great university. And in the type of economics research I did, one of the top places in the world. It was just fantastic colleagues. And I went there and two good things happened. One is I basically finished the work that would wind up being my second book, which was fun. But the other thing that happened was after a while, after just a month or two, I said to my wife at dinner, I said, this is going to sound funny, but I miss committee meetings. And it's not that I missed committee meetings, but I missed being part of helping run the place. And a good, really close professional friend of mine was associate provost at Michigan. He became provost a year later. And in talking to him about his experiences, it became very clear. No, I had a year where all I had to do was work on research, and I did a lot of research. But it was also a year to reflect. And what I reflected on is, I think I really want to invest time and effort into institutional leadership. And so it was that sabbatical opportunity, and then crystallized by that conversation coming out of that job interview a couple of years later that did it. But it really was a path to get there. But I think the key part of it, I guess, again, it makes sense looking backwards, Kim. But a key part of it was just being open to recognizing that was possible. I was tenured. I was a department chair at a top 40 national research university. According to U.S. News and World Report, I'm downwardly mobile, but I'm really, really happy. And that's part of the point. U.S. News and World Report's rankings don't run my life. And so it's being open to that call of what's really important, and also then, being open to look for the experiences and opportunities to do that. So a wonderful question from Maya's iPhone. Presumably that's from Maya, but maybe her iPhone is taken over. How would I define the culture of CC, and how do we market that as part of the college's value proposition and competitive advantage? This is a place that really cares about human thriving. And that shows up in our academic offerings. I talked about that commitment to social justice as reflected in this idea of trauma-informed, but it's deeper than that. This is not only a small place because it's small, but it's small because there are people who are being intentional about looking for ways to help each other and to then go on and make the world a better place. And so, how do we market that? It's a little tricky because part of it is that's an experienced, that's not something where I can hold it up and say, here's what's going on. So a lot of it is finding the stories to tell about our successful graduates. And a lot of it is by making sure that the way that we communicate, whether it's in our writing and our web pages, and especially how we interact with other people in person, is consistent with that idea about caring about individuals and human thriving. But again, a big part of it is to work on getting people into these types of individual conversations. Again, just to give you a sense of the kind of place that we are, I like to say every college president works metaphorically in a goldfish bowl. Columbia College, we've taken that literally, and the president works in a goldfish bowl. If you haven't been to campus, the president's office has two big windows in it. It's on the ground level. You look out one side, it's what's called the campus mall. Well, that sounds like it's kind of the middle of a lot of activity, and it is. You look out the other window, it's called the campus green, which sounds like a lot of activity, and it is. And in fact, our campus tour guides, well, you can probably already tell what my personality is. So I've got to know them, and I like. They know that I like to run. If I see them, I like to run out and say hi to the campus tour. And so some of them, there's one in particular that will just about like come up and bang on the window to have me come out. So I was in the office having a conversation with a very generous person who actually has a building named after them here on campus. And this particular tour guide came by and she's like, waving and get on out here. And so I took the person out and she got kicked out of being introduced, so the tour guide and the prospective students were really impressed. It's like, okay, well, you saw this building on your tour. Well, here's the person. And so everybody had it. And the person, of course, got a kick out of meeting them. So just, but again, having, I do it because it's who I am, but I can tell you having tour guides talk about, hey, I see the president and I have lunch with the president and hey, let me wave and see if he'll come out and say hi. That's a way of conveying who we are. And, I've met President Kaslan. I think highly of him. I'm pretty sure he's not out there trying to say hi individually to tour groups because it's just not feasible at a place like Carolina, which is a fantastic institution. And so that's part of who we are and what we do. From Chris. Hi, Christy. Christy's one of our partners who I know and they do great work with us here on campus. So advancing women's leadership. Is this going to be an area of focus? Absolutely. Well, I will say as long as I have anything to say about it, and I have a little bit to say about it. One of the general questions about becoming co-ed is, does that mean we're abandoning this emphasis on women's leadership? Absolutely not. What we're doing, I was talking with an alum about this. I said, one of the things that attracted me was this historical emphasis and historical success in empowering and equipping and sending forth women as leaders. And, from my point of view, it's just a chance to do it in a different environment. And I was talking with an alum about this, and I said, well, we're still, of course, going to emphasize this. We're just now doing it in a co-ed environment. Without blinking, she said, yes, that's the world. I said, oh, that's good. Can I borrow that? She says, yeah, you can go ahead and tell that story. So I've been, so that's there. And the other part of it, of course, is we need to educate men who know how to follow women leaders, who know how to work side by side as fellow leaders with women, and who know how to mentor and promote women leaders. And so, while we're recruiting men, that's the kind of man I want to be. And that's the kind of men we want to recruit here, and certainly that we want to graduate from here. One thing to know about the single gender versus co-ed, depending on which survey you look at, only between about 2% and 5% of graduating high school students, high school women, will look at a single gender institution. It's just it's really, over the last number of decades, the potential population has dwindled. And so, this is not, well, I say this advisedly because there's always a risk, but a tongue-in-cheek answer as to why go co-ed is so that we can recruit women. Just again, in 1960 and 1970, maybe in 1980 and 1990, there was a critical mass of women who were looking for that single gender experience. There's much fewer now. And so, to make sure that we're able to reach out to all of the women that we want to equip as leaders, it helps to also have some men around as well. Okay.
Perfect, Dr. Bogart. That's wonderful. Especially the comments about the teaching the men to go along with women leadership. That's cool.
And again, it gets back to the one person at a time.
Mhm.
Again, as a small place, we have that opportunity to build people up, and to help people see each other maybe differently than they did before. One of the great things about college, I see this all the time. Again, I know small colleges. We get people who come here who maybe were part of a club in high school, but they weren't ever the president. And I'll talk to them, and they'll be juniors or seniors, and they're president of the student body, or they're president of some club or something. And I'll say, well, how did that happen? I said, well, I came here and I had never been president of anything, but they needed a president and I really cared about it. And so I became the president. And so there we go. Okay. Oh, from from Beth, what about being president brings me the most joy? Students. Every time a student succeeds. Friday's commencement, April is a crazy month because we have all kinds of award ceremonies and culminating activities and dance and this and it's just, I can't get to everything, and it's frustrating, but it is so invigorating. It gets me through all the budget meetings and accreditation and process stuff. But it's every time a student succeeds, that's why I'm in this, and that's what's awesome. All right, a leadership philosophy to prepare students from minority groups to fill increasing leadership roles with unique challenges and barriers. Yeah, that's a great question. It's a vital question. One of the cool features of Columbia College's demographics is it's not always well known. Private colleges, with a lot of private colleges, let me put it this way, are in fact truly access institutions. Over half of our students are eligible for Pell Grants, which of course has a strict income cap on it. So we're educating students who are not rich. I'm sure there are some rich students too, and in addition, we have for our undergraduate day program, we have online and evening and graduate programs. But for the kind of the flagship undergraduate program, we have interesting demographics. We have roughly equal percentages of white and non-white students, which is very rare in America. Usually you're in spaces that are either where there's a majority minority, one way or the other. And so I think that well, I know that is one feature that attracted me to Columbia College is the next generation is growing up in an America where in fact that's the case. Where what we think of as majority or minority is not true anymore when you look at students. And so I think that there's an increasing need when we imagine leaders to make sure when we imagine leaders, it's not just white middle-aged men. That can't be your mental picture of a leader. And the way not to imagine that is to make sure that we have pictures of leaders who are women, who are members of minoritized populations, who have come from various religious backgrounds, various national origin backgrounds, various professional backgrounds. And again, it starts here on campus with making sure that we lift up both among the student body, but also that we have faculty and staff with people who represent various different paths to these leadership positions. Had a wonderful speaker in my previous institution a couple of years ago, brought someone in to lead a couple of workshops and discussion groups on how to help build a broader leadership representation. And she talked a lot about, she said people need mirrors and they need windows, right? You need to see leaders who don't look like you because that's an important part of growth. You need to see people who don't look like you, but you also need you need mirrors. You need people where you can see yourself. And so it's important for us to look for those potential leaders and help them see their own potential and realize that potential. And again, that's true here on campus, but as I mentioned, we're part of the community more broadly. And so as we're able to open up the campus again, I hope starting in the fall, you know, to work with our neighbors, to work with the Clare neighborhood, North Main, the city of Columbia, and beyond, to help lift up a variety of pictures, so that when you have that mental picture of a leader, that it's not the same as that mental picture of a leader that too often has been the default here in America.
I'm actually going to chime in with one more, and it may be close to the last one. We'll keep watching the chat. So you are a newer leader for Columbia College in our community. You've been here 7 to 8 months or so. So tell us about Columbia and how you sell the city of Columbia to students, to prospective faculty and staff that you're trying to recruit to be part of your community and then contribute into our greater community. So talk to us a bit about that, since you're in the midst of that transition and learning about the gifts of our city and how it's a strength of what you're doing and leading at Columbia College.
Oh yeah, I really like it here. This is a place, I talk about knowing what you like. My wife and I like medium-sized metropolitan areas. We lived in Cleveland, we lived outside of Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and then outside of Knoxville, Tennessee, and now here. It's small enough that, or it's big enough that there's interesting things to do, and it's small enough that you can afford it and get there. It's a college town. I didn't realize how much of a college town it was before I got here. I mean, of course, I knew about the university. I didn't know about how large and how strong Midlands Tech was until I got here. Fantastic place. President Rames is awesome. Benedict and Allen are also, important parts. I actually knew Rosalind Artis before I got here, and then I got here and was like, wait, now you're my neighbor. This is fun. So we're a college town and a state capital. State capitals always have more culture than you'd expect for a city their size, because the legislature's here and there's more good restaurants because the lobbyists have to eat lunch. So there's always more, so there's always a lot of culture as a result of that. And there's I haven't been able to take full advantage of it because of the COVID and all the rest of it. But again, the investments in parks and other types of amenities are very visible and evident. I'm a jogger. And so on the weekends, I'm over on either the West KC Columbia Riverwalk or on the canal side. You'll see me as you blow past me. But that's what I sell it is like I said, it's big enough but small enough. And again, as a college town, what's nice about college towns is you always have new people coming, and with a diverse economic base. I've been the new person every place I ever lived. Having mentioned, I've lived in a lot of different places, and some communities are more welcoming to new people than others. And this seems like a place that is very much well, you weren't born here, but you got here as quickly as you could. That was a good choice. How do you want to get involved? And of course, it's not the same as someone that's been here for 4 generations or whatever. But again, I felt very welcomed, and I most of that is, of course, people don't know me at all, but they know Columbia College, and that's fine. I understand that at this point in my time here, I feel very welcomed because people really want Columbia College to succeed, and I'm part of it. But that's the way that it starts. Then I get a chance to help, with any luck, make a good impression on my own, and help find opportunities where, again, I have certain skills and interests that I would like to deploy more broadly, just other than just with Columbia College, and getting welcomed on, as a representative of Columbia College is a great start to all of that. So those are a few different pieces. Well, I will say the other thing, again, having been a student of urban areas my whole life, the fact that you can live I was in an apartment literally downtown, a block from the State House for 2 months while they were doing some work on the house here on campus. The fact that within 15 minutes you can be from a downtown apartment to full-blown rural. There's, you know, driving up Main Street. That's awesome, because when I'm recruiting people, I can say, well, do you want to live urban? Fine. You know, do you want to live rural? Do you want some flavor of suburban? We've got it. So, but no, I love it. And again, what I appreciate, you know, the fact that, again, this group is willing to invest their time on a Tuesday afternoon to welcome the new guy to town. It means and if nothing else, learn how not to do things from my bad example. Then that's a good sign.
Thank you so much, Dr. Bogart. And we do welcome you to the community. We're glad you're here and entrusted with the position you have, and look forward to, you know, just continuing to stay updated about everything going on at Columbia College in the years ahead. I know it's going to be a lot, and it's going to keep you very busy and everything. So definitely look forward to seeing you at some other Leadership Columbia events and things in the future. Thank you everyone for attending today's conversation. And like I said, just keep an eye out for upcoming announcements on continued events to close out our programming year and everything. And just hope you all have a wonderful week.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Dr.
Thanks,
Bogart.
everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Dr. Bogart.
See you soon.
Dr. Dindor.
Bye-bye.